The Cybermen are one of the most prolific enemies that the Doctor has ever faced, and the Silver Giants have been stomping across our screens for over 50 years now. And when it comes to ranking the Doctor's enemies, the Daleks usually take the top spot, but for me the Cybermen will always be my favourite monster, simply because they were my first. Way back many years ago in 2006, I caught the Series 2 story Rise of the Cybermen on TV, and by the time the cliffhanger came around, I was instantly hooked and kept watching. Since then, the Cybermen have always been my favourite, as, unlike the Daleks, the Cybermen are a warning. The Cyberman creators Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis also realised this, as they hit upon the idea that cybernetics will play an important part in humanity's future, and what would happen if a person had had so many prosthetics that they could no longer distinguish themselves between man and machine. This is still very relevant today with the advancement in technology and how reliant human beings are with constant upgrades to our laptops, phones and tablets. Furthermore, the Cybermen's most primary instinct is to survive, and they feel that by upgrading humans, they're doing us a massive favour. But what stories amplify these elements the best? Which stories show the Cybermen at their most desperate, scary, sneaky, and show the true horror of cyber conversion? This video will be ranking all their television appearances from worst to best. Now before we start, just remember, this is all opinion based, so if you happen to disagree with this list, that is perfectly fine. And also cameo appearances by them in say The Pandorica Opens and A Good Man Goes to War won't be counted here. Furthermore, I'm also going to discount the 5 Doctors, as while they do appear prominently alongside the Master, I feel that the overall story isn't really about them, and they're just a named obstacle used to celebrate the series' 20th anniversary. Controversial I know, but my list, my rules. And without further ado, let's continue. Number 16. The Next Doctor. Yeah, this may be a surprise to a lot of people that I put this at the bottom, but for me this is the most disappointing Cyberman story, simply because they play second fiddle to Jackson Lake, a man who lost his wife and child to the Cybermen, and in the trauma thinks he's now the Doctor. In my opinion, the two stories don't gel together well, and the Cybermen suffer because of it. While I do enjoy the scene of them massacring Victorian men in a graveyard, I feel that's the only moment they shine, as the main villain feels like Miss Hartigan, who does have an interesting motivation of wanting to be liberated from the oppressions of man, but I feel the Cybermen should have been made the main focus, as they just feel depowered in comparison. Furthermore, while I appreciate Russell T Davies wanting to add variations of the Cybermen, such as the Cyber Shades and the Cyber King, here they don't do much for me. The Cyber Shades look really cheap, as they literally look like people in capes over cheap rugs. But the idea of converting animals with cybernetics is an interesting idea, but again, it's not explored or executed very well. The Next Doctor for me is an example of too much going on and none of it gelling well together, and the fact that it comes at the expense of the Cybermen makes this story a disappointment for me. Number 15. Nightmare in Silver. This is the story that I felt had the most potential for the Cybermen, but was sadly wasted and felt rushed. The main aim of this story was to make the Cybermen scary again, and for lack of a better word, give them an upgrade. Sadly, I think it changed the Cybermen for the worst. While I think the design is pretty good and a nice callback to their streamlined appearances in the 60s, their constant upgrading just feels like cheating as opposed to something scary. Whenever these Cybermen are placed with a weakness, they upgrade and evolve themselves from their weakness within seconds. Heck, they become so overpowered the Doctor has to blow up the planet that they're on. It's pretty ridiculous. Furthermore, I feel that the organic side of the Cybermen feels lost, and they've now just become your average robot with very little humanity left. And in my opinion, if you don't leave a chunk of humanity within them, they lose a lot of their scariness and become, as I said, just another race of robots. The Cyber Planner is also a nice callback to the 60s as well, and Matt Smith gives a phenomenal performance, but again, this doesn't feel like the Cybermen. The reason I rank Nightmare in Silver so low is that I felt it had the most potential but was sadly wasted or just mishandled. Oh, and Angie and Artie are also very insufferable. Moving on. Number 14. Silver Nemesis. A lot of you were probably thinking that this should have been the lowest, but rewatching it recently, while I don't think Nemesis is particularly good, there are a few elements that I do like. I think the Cybermen design here is incredible, and while yes, it is an updated version of the Earthshock variant, I still feel they look very impressive. Furthermore, the opening battle in episode 2 is pretty impressive, as they completely maul down an army of neo-Nazis. Sadly, this is really the only time they get to show off their true power, and even then they get taken down with golden arrows, which just makes them too easy to kill. Heck, Ace manages to beat them with gold coins and a slingshot. It's pretty silly. What stops Silver Nemesis from being a disaster, however, is the chemistry between the 7th Doctor and Ace. They look like they're having a lot of fun, so the story isn't completely unwatchable for me. But the Cybermen may look impressive, they're not done much justice in the programme's silver anniversary. Number 13. The Wheel in Space. Again, this story falls into the category of this could have been any monster, and the story wouldn't have changed a bit in my opinion. The Cybermen plan to invade a space station so they can use it to invade the Earth from. And while the space station setting is appropriately used to invoke a sense of claustrophobia, the Cybermen themselves just lack any screen presence here. Only seeing 2 on screen certainly doesn't help, and their design just looks really thin and just lacks any impact. The biggest crime the Wheel in Space commits is that it just feels tired and very lackluster for a series finale, as well as being a Cyberman story, and it just feels really convoluted and tame. One interesting aspect is the first appearance of new companion Zoe, who shares a lot of similarities with the Cybermen. Initially she relies on logic and knowledge, and has a lack of emotion, but her encounter with the Doctor and Jamie gives her a new outlook on life. Pretty interesting concept, but not enough to save this lackluster encounter with the Silver Giants. Number 12. Revenge of the Cybermen. Now this story introduces the idea that gold is lethal to the Cybermen, and in my opinion this was a pretty silly weakness to introduce. The gold clogs up their chest units and suffocates them, though my question is, if they don't need oxygen to survive, why would they suffocate? The redesign I do think is quite effective, as they do look pretty buff, and the imagery of them walking through the caves of Voga is pretty atmospheric and effective. Though again, if Voga is made of gold, how can they walk through the gold mines without so much as a wheeze from all the gold that surrounds them? Their dialogue doesn't really help either, as they're usually seen strutting around with hands on their hips and saying rather emotive dialogue. I think someone forgot that emotions are for the weak here. However, the guns in their heads are a nice idea. Their weaponry is built into them, so in order to take them down, you have to go for the head. Furthermore, it is cool to see the Cybermats again, and I do like how they lack any eyes this time and seem more snake-like as opposed to a metal rodent. Revenge of the Cybermen did try and add new mythology to the cyber lore, but ultimately it just ended up being contradictory and frustrating. Not a terrible story, but not golden either. Number 11. Closing time. While the story does get criticism for presenting the Cybermen as an afterthought, I feel the idea of less is more is executed quite well here. A crashed cyber spaceship lies beneath a shopping centre, and a group of worn down Cybermen are drawing power via their Cybermats in order to repair their broken ship. While the Cybermen are pretty much an afterthought, I really do enjoy the updated version of the Cybermat, and they are pretty much like their masters. They're organic beings in a metal shell, and the redesign is a great update for the new series. The one thing that bugs me is the inclusion of Craig. While I do enjoy the character, I felt that his conversion into a Cyberman should have happened, as it could have added to the Doctor's pessimism of facing his death in Series 6. With the death of Craig, the Doctor could have thought that maybe he's doing more harm than good, as had he not seen Craig again, he may not have been inspired to help the Doctor, which resulted in his conversion. I don't buy the fact that the Cybermen were defeated by love. You're going to suggest that any time a human has been converted, they never thought of a loved one that they could use against the Cybermen. It's contradictory against the idea that those that are converted stay a Cyberman. However, with the inclusion of the Cybermats and the Cybermen looking pretty scary, Closing Time is still a fun adventure that I do enjoy to this day. Number 10. Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. Yeah, I might get hate for putting this two-parter as low as this, but I'm quite torn on this. Literally split between the episodes. I love Army of Ghosts, but feel that Doomsday is lacking in comparison. The build-up in Army of Ghosts is very effective, as the Cybermen are using gaps between the universe to invade Earth from their own parallel version. However, misguided human beings at the Torchwood Tower are the instigators, and the Cybermen seem to be relying on their curiosity and desire for a new energy source to their advantage, as they control members of the Torchwood staff and open the breach to allow the ghosts to reveal themselves as Cybermen. These ideas are fantastic, and the imagery of the ghosts becoming Cybermen is still effective to this day and such a brilliant twist. So yeah, we've got everything here. Cybermen using mind control, relying on humanity's emotions to their advantage, and a massive army of Cybermen in famous Earth landmarks. So why is this so low, you may ask? Well, the problem is the following episode, Doomsday. The Daleks are revealed to be hiding in a sphere that exists outside of reality to escape the Time War, and they have made their way to Earth as well. Both enemies declare war, and I just feel like the story loses a lot of its intelligence, and it seems like a kid smashing their action figures together in Toys R Us. Furthermore, the Cybermen then play second fiddle to the Daleks, as they are constantly shot down by them and don't even get to defeat a single Dalek, which just makes them look like pansies. It's clear Russell T Davies preferred the Daleks to the Cybermen, and while I still enjoy this two-parter on an action level a lot, I personally feel that the setup in Army of Ghosts could have made for a perfect Cyberman story, but Doomsday lets it down. Sadly, wasted potential on the Cybermen's part for me. Number 9. Dark Water and Death in Heaven. I wasn't too sure on where to place this finale alongside the Series 2 finale, as I feel they both suffer similar problems. Great first part, but then the Cybermen again play second fiddle to another of the Doctor's enemies, and in this case the Master. However, I do applaud Stephen Moffat for trying something new with the Cybermen that I feel is a pretty effective update. The Cybermen themselves want to prevent death in humanity, and believe that putting humans in a metal suit is the best way to survive. But this time they are taking the minds of deceased humans and placing them in cybersuits, but convincing the virtual humans they capture not to be cremated at death, as they need the bodies as well. Furthermore, they use Danny Pink's PTSD as a weapon against him, being reminded of a boy he killed while in the Forces and wanting him to forget his emotions so he's fully converted. I think this is a pretty effective tactic that the Cybermen use to build their army. Sadly, I feel that in the next episode, Death in Heaven, they again play second fiddle to the Master, as they're used as an army for the Doctor, which is a good idea on its own, but shouldn't have come at the expense of the Cybermen. However, I feel that they make up for it by showing Danny Pink's body squashed into a cybersuit with electronics around him, and it's a pretty horrific image. I enjoy a lot of this two-parter and how the Cybermen are associated with death, and I think it's handled with maturity. Sadly, the Cybermen don't do as much as they should do in the second episode, and having them fly is a big no-no in my books. Number 8. Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. This was the first Doctor Who story I ever saw, so naturally it holds a special place in my heart of steel. However, rest assured this is not just the nostalgia talking, as this two-parter is a very effective upgrade for the Cybermen in the 21st century. While the original Cybermen were about how prosthetics and fake limbs take over our lives, this is more inspired by how technology runs our lives. Humans in a parallel Earth are reliant on earpods that download info into their heads from Cybers Industries, but ultimately is used to control them, so they turn into Cybermen. Where this succeeds and where Nightmare in Silver fails in my opinion is that the human aspect is still there. The obsession by Cyberman creator John Lumick to survive is very human and will do whatever it takes to achieve immortality, even if it means sacrificing everything that makes us humans. Equally, you can see where he's coming from, as with everyone a metal man, there is peace in the world and unity, but the Doctor argues that everyday humans is what makes the world a brilliant place, and is great to watch. Furthermore, I like how the Cybermen are defeated by a simple code that turns their emotions back on. It's a scary parallel to how the next upgrade on our tech is just a simple code and a switch away, and how close the humans are to losing their humanity. This two-parter was a brilliant update for the Cybermen, and in my opinion certainly shows them as a force to be reckoned with, that sadly was lacking in the new series so far. But for the time being, the Silver Giants came back to our screens with an absolute bang. Number 7. The Moonbase. While I do enjoy seeing the Cybermen as a massive unstoppable army, they can equally be as scary when they are at their most sneaky. They sneak into a weather control moonbase and contaminate the sugar supply to disable members of the crew, and they sneak into the sickbay and carry them off for conversion. I particularly like how they use sugar. A liking for a sweet hot coffee is a weakness of the flesh, which the Cybermen are exploiting for their own advantage. Unlike the Daleks, you rarely encounter the Cybermen at the height of their power, and this story is a reflection of that, as the Cybermen are on their last legs since the destruction of their home planet Mondas. They aren't as confident as they are in that story, and instead are more sneaky and cautious, as they go to a lot of trouble using converted humans to carry out their plan of using the gravitron to destroy the surface of the Earth with the weather. The redesign is very effective, and their growling voice is really effective, as well as the sense of claustrophobia that is present throughout. The Doctor's speech about the universe breeding terrible things and fighting against them is fantastic, and the reappearance of the Cybermen inspires him to stay and not leave the moonbase until they are defeated. With the Cybermen at their most scary, a claustrophobic setting, and a great redesign, the moonbase certainly established the Cybermen as a reoccurring threat. Number 6. The Invasion. This story easily shows the Cybermen at their most powerful, as they form an alliance with businessman Tobias Vaughn and set up International Electromatics to sell electronics around the world that transmit a signal to paralyze human beings, allowing Cybermen hiding in the sewers to take over the Earth. The invasion is so massive in scale it could almost be a film, and the imagery of Cybermen marching out of St. Paul's Cathedral is such an iconic image to this day that they just feel like a force to be reckoned with. The idea of setting this on contemporary Earth is also a good idea, as kids may be going to be bed scared that Cybermen are lurking beneath them in the London sewers. While they don't appear until the end of episode 4, they are still used very well, fighting in a lot of action scenes with Unit, and the scenes between the Cyber Director and Vaughn are also entertaining, as Vaughn offers human solutions while the Cyber Director offers logical tactics. Furthermore, it's the first time that emotions are used to defeat the Cybermen, as Vaughn infects them with a Cerebrotron mentor and has a cybernetic body himself. It shows how emotions have their uses, and how Vaughn comes close to beating the Cybermen himself. With excellent direction, action, and the Cybermen a force to be reckoned with, the invasion is the Cybermen at their very best. Number 5. The 10th Planet. What makes this story work as well as it does for me is the original design. The Cybermen have sing-song-like voices, covered in tubing, cloth faces, and have human hands. They are easily the most human-looking Cybermen. In my opinion, this makes them all the more terrifying, as they genuinely look like they were made in a hospital, and how close we are to becoming Cybermen ourselves. The story itself moves along at a great pace, as there's a threat around every corner, such as the routine space probe going wrong, the Cyberman's home planet Mondas draining energy from the Earth, and Cybermen invading from every corner. Furthermore, there's also a showing of how the Cybermen have moved on from emotions. They show no care for the stranded astronauts in space, yet General Cutler risks the Earth being covered in radiation to save his son, who is also in space trying to rescue the astronauts. It really makes you think on who the superior species is. While the 10th Planet is not the best in terms of giving the Doctor one last adventure, it's still effective in debuting one of Doctor Who's most iconic enemies. Number 4. Earthshock. This story was certainly a shock, no pun intended, when it was first broadcast in 1982. The return of the Cybermen was kept a secret until Part 1's cliffhanger, and even then there was no publicity hyping their return. Their return after 7 years was handled very well in Earthshock, as the Cybermen are given a great redesign that incorporates the handles from the Invasion, the sleek look from Tomb, and the organic look in the 10th Planet. The fact that you can see their mouth moving reminds us that these Cybermen were once us. The Cybermen get a lot to do and take down anybody who gets in their way, and they will not stop until they finish their objective. They plan to destroy a conference on Earth that will unite humanity against them, and the Cybermen reliant on logic plan to end the war before it starts is a very effective plan and keeps true to their characters. Plus, I love the Doctor's speech about small beautiful events is what makes us human, but the Cybermen see it as irrelevant and even a weakness that they use against the Doctor. The action scenes are terrific, the Cybermen are at their best with a great new update, and it cemented the Cybermen as a reoccurring threat once again for the remainder of the 1980s. Number 3. Bold Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls. While Rise of the Cybermen showed the horrors of cyber conversion on a technological level, this gets the Cybermen back to their organic roots in such a terrifying way. At the very bottom of a spaceship where time is relative, injured humans are being turned into Cybermen with the help of Mr. Razor, and what makes this so scary is the fact that you can see these humans as patients. The scene where Bill discovers the patients pressing the pain button, but they're muted by the staff, is terrifying. They want to help them, but they don't want what comes in between. The pain of becoming a Cyberman. They genuinely look like humans who are about to undergo the biggest surgery of their lives. Furthermore, the Doctor pretty much confirms the conflicting origins of the Cybermen and deduces that as long as humanity has had the will to survive, there will always be Cybermen. In the words of Thanos, they are inevitable. While again they do play second fiddle to the two Masters in the second part, they still pose as a legitimate threat that the Doctor needs to defeat. Not to mention, the Doctor blowing up the Cybermen while name-dropping all the times he's defeated them is just the icing on the cake. With cyber continuity littered throughout, the Cybermen established as a threat again, and an increase on the horror of cyber conversion, the series 10 finale is the Cybermen restored to their former glory. Number 2. The Tomb of the Cybermen. When Matt Smith got the role of the Doctor, he watched this story for inspiration, and when he finished, he rang Stephen Moffat to tell him how brilliant it was, and yeah, I pretty much agree. This story has the Cybermen at their most scary and their most sneaky at the same time. They hide themselves away in ice tombs on Telos and wait for humans to discover them. Because they only wanted superior and intelligent humans, they made the trap very complicated, as they draw upon the weakness of humanity's curiosity for them to release them from their slumber. This is more or less a mummy story, but with Cybermen, and it's an interesting twist on a classic mummy tale. The scene where the Cybermen awake from their tombs is one of Doctor Who's greatest moments. The music combined with the slowness of the Cybermen awakening just ranks the horror aspect up to 100. The Cyber Controller also makes his debut here and plans to make a new race of Cybermen with the archaeologists in order to survive. This is their primary objective here, and it just makes their desperation all the more scary. Heck, it's their final words of the story. We also get an insight into humans like Klieg, who think that his intelligence combined with the Cybermen's power will give them control of the Earth, and it's interesting to see humans who rely too much on logic and are the Cybermen's biggest fans. With an impressive set of Cybermen, an excellent plot, scares around every corner, the Tomb of the Cybermen will forever be hailed as one of the Silver Giant's greatest outings. Number 1. Attack of the Cybermen. This list has been pretty controversial for some, no doubt, but this is probably the most controversial choice ever, as I'm naming Attack of the Cybermen as my favourite Cyberman story. For me, this encompasses everything that make the Cybermen my favourite monster. We have humans being converted into Cybermen, half-converted humans fighting back against them, references to past adventures such as the 10th Planet, Tomb of the Cybermen and the Invasion, humour, violence, action, etc. Everything about this story is just perfect. The Cybermen plot to use a time machine to hijack Halley's Comet and crash it into Earth so their home planet Mondas won't be destroyed in 1986. Given that the Cybermen can now time travel, it makes perfect sense for these past references to make appearances, and I love the callbacks to these excellent adventures. The Cybermen themselves are a force to be reckoned with, as they can cause humans a lot of pain just through their strength, crushing Litton's hands, and that may be a bit too far for some, but for me it just adds to their threat. The horror of cyber conversion is shown as mercenary Litton is put through the blender and even begs the Doctor to kill him rather than become a Cyberman. We also see Stratton and Bates, two prisoners on Telos who have been half converted. They retain their humanity but still have cybernetic limbs, meaning they're still as strong as Cybermen. It's an interesting idea that we see rejects or upgrades gone wrong, and I really wish that the series in the future would delve into this. It has everything that makes the Cybermen so popular in my opinion, but what I also love about Doctor Who: humour, violence, an excellent score, a conceited yet compassionate Doctor, and an action-packed band that makes this my favourite Cyberman story. Well everyone, that is all from me. Be sure to like, share and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite Cyberman stories are, and I shall see you all next time for more upgrades. Goodbye.